It is setting it up, and I'm going to mute myself. So,
All right, good afternoon, friends. This is Lindsay Cross, Government Relations Director with Florida Conservation Voters. Hope that you've had a great week. We're getting towards the end of July, which is so hard to believe, but hopefully you've settled into a new routine that incorporates your mask, your hand sanitizer, your social distancing, and all of the ways that you can still safely connect to those in your friend and your family groups and in your communities. I wanted to share a short update with you on the MCORS, the toll roads process, because we just finished round 6 of the task force meetings. There were meetings that were conducted on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week, and I participated in all 3 of those and gave public comments to help to share the concerns that you as conservation voters have and the concerns of organizations and businesses around the state, some of them as part of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition, of which we're a steering committee member, and then just lots of everyday Floridians who are concerned, just like you are, about our water, our wildlife, our agriculture, our rural communities, and our hard-earned taxpayer money. So the focus this round of meetings was really for the task force members to start to get into the guiding principles. There's about 23 guiding principles that they're looking at right now. And there was a lot of discussion from the task force members about how to take the wiggle room out of some of these guiding principles, because the way some of the text is written, it gives DOT a lot of leeway to get around potentially environmental protection, protection of rural character, and the task force members, there's several of them on the environmental side that are doing a really good job of trying to make those stronger than DOT has originally proposed. Of course, we will always come back to the idea that the only responsible approach is to have a no build strategy for this entire suite of corridors. So let's back up just a little bit. Again, we're looking at 3 swath areas throughout the state. The Suncoast Connector is a road that, if built, would be about 150 miles from Citrus County all the way up to the border of Georgia. Of course, we know that Georgia was not privy to these plans when the legislation was proposed last year. So, it's always important to talk to your neighbors about big projects like that. The Southwest Central Florida Connector Road is one that is really kind of a reemergence of the Heartland Parkway, which failed about a decade ago because it was not economically viable, and there would be so much destruction to the natural area, including Florida panther habitat. That would essentially go from Collier, which is where Naples is, up to Polk County in the center of the state. That one's about 140 miles. And then there's a shorter 40-mile connector in the middle that incorporates so task force members from each of the groups met virtually this week. DOT was originally going to have them meet in person, but of course, as we're seeing rising numbers of COVID-19 around our state, that is not a responsible thing to do. They did have locations in each of the corridor areas that the public could view in person. I think those were very sparsely attended, as well as the virtual meetings just are not having as many public comments as the in-person meetings did. We have raised the point that these virtual meetings really stymie meaningful public participation, and it's incredibly difficult for the task force members themselves to have good dialogue between themselves. They're raising their virtual hands and really are at the mercy of DOT and their facilitators to call on them and to allow that dialogue to happen. There was concern from the task force members, which is something that we have called on DOT to do as well, to put a halt to these meetings because our state that this is such a massive project that's already saddling our state with some significant financial burdens, that this is just not the time to be rushing forward and trying to meet a ridiculous November 15th deadline to have these final reports finished. On the economic side, there was an excellent report that came out earlier this week from a group called Florida Tax Watch that looks specifically at the Suncoast Connector Corridor and the viability of it, and really how the heck we would ever pay for something like that. I'm going to let Carson put that, my comms person, share this document for you, because I think it's something that we should all take a look at. So Florida Tax Watch, just as a little bit of background, this is an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit group that calls itself a government watchdog. I shared this during the comment period, and I prefaced it by saying, this is not a group of liberal tree huggers. These people are not here just to save the bunnies and the bees and the panthers. They're really here to save Floridians' taxpayer dollars, and be cognizant of that. And what this report found is that there's no way that we're going to be able to pay for this road, and by extension, the other two roads are not economically viable either. The Suncoast Connector, their estimate is that it could cost anywhere between $4 and $10.5 billion to build this road, and that it would require tolls, per mile toll, in excess to what the average is within the entire Florida Turnpike system. So if you're a resident of Central Florida or in South Florida that's traveling these toll roads a lot, I've heard people talk about how it adds $10 or more to their daily commute every day to have to be on these toll roads. So you think of extrapolating that and bringing it over to an area with more rural communities where they're struggling just to find economic opportunities and jobs. And now you're going to saddle them with additional debt due to these toll roads. It really feels like a callous thing to do. So the Florida Tax Watch report did get a lot of attention in the media this week, and it's important because DOT has not been able to prove the economic viability of any of these roads, nor have they been able to demonstrate the need. And in the legislation that enabled the creation of these task forces and the project itself, SB 7068, which was passed in 2019, it clearly sets up that one of the first roles of the task forces is to evaluate the need for these roads. And what DOT has done really is sidestep that. They've jumped right to all the fun things like broadband and electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles, and really have not focused on the need, the ridership. Some of the projections they've shown demonstrates that a lot of these roads are only at about 20% capacity at some of the times. For example, places within the US 19, which is along the same swath where a new toll road could be built, is very underutilized. And the thought of having a parallel road or something that is going to take that and make it into a more extensive tolled facility just isn't necessary when we have significant transportation infrastructure needs in places where people are actually living right now. So we want to continue to highlight kind of the hypocrisy between that of elected officials who call themselves fiscal conservatives, but are willing to vote for and to continue to support this type of legislation. It's important to note that at the end of June, when Governor DeSantis signed the budget into law, he also signed DOT's 5-year work plan, which has money in there for consultants and for acquisition of right-of-way for these roads. And the budget, which was originally supposed to be $90 million for this current fiscal year of 2020/2021, was supposed to be $90 million. It's actually ballooned up to dollars right now because there are monies set aside in funds that are directly supposed to support small rural communities, things like the Small County Road Assistance Program or the Transportation Disadvantage Fund. Within the statute, this is pretty sneaky, that money, if it's not used for those purposes, gets rolled into the MCOR's budget. So while you can, it's like giving someone a gift and then saying, well, we're going to take it back. We just wanted you to look at it and picture how much you would love having this new paddleboard or this new big egg, green egg. I'm not a griller, so people will be able to call me out on that, but someone's gonna dangle this shiny object in front of you and then take it away. So we're concerned with that. If one of the goals is to really prop up our rural communities and bring things like broadband and water quality infrastructure, let's make that a priority for the 2021 legislative session and decouple it from these roads, because the idea of using a tolled highway to protect our water or a tolled highway to protect our wildlife and our habitats is just backwards thinking, and something that one of the task force members, Shannon Estenos from Everglades Foundation, really appreciated her getting into some of the wordsmithing of the process of, so if the end goal is to protect wildlife habitat, how is a toll road facilitating that? It really isn't. Something that I also wanted to focus on that was included in my public comments was the lack of transparency and proactivity on the case of DOT to share all of the comments that have come in nearly a year's time now, since August. Public comments, things that have been submitted through in-person meetings or their DOT listens email. They've been pretty closed off with providing that information. They talk a good game about how public participation is so important, but have not made it readily available to you or I in a way that's easy to access. So members of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition, our steering committee, Florida Conservation Voters is one of the founding members of that group. We actually made a public records request back in March through one of our other steering committee members to get all of those public comments. And through a really painstaking effort, I was involved with it, sorting through comments, reading some of the great things that people have said about how much they value our natural areas and want to protect wild Florida and our water and our wildlife habitats, and really want to protect our rural lifestyles as a choice for them. But members of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition and volunteers, we sorted through thousands of comments. And what DOT has failed to do is categorize those according to the sentiment, as they put it, of whether people are for or against these roads, or maybe have not decided yet. So we did that work for them. And out of 1,546 comments, 87.7% of them were against the roads. DOT has also failed to include in a meaningful way input that's come to them from what they call form letters. So we have called on many of you in the conservation voter community to sign on petitions. That is a valid form of public participation. And I'm not going to say that that does not count, because it absolutely counts. And we have a new petition where we're asking DOT to put the brakes on this process, because it's just not the time to be doing it right now. But DOT has just kind of lumped all those things together. They have not categorized them. They have not put them into bins of focus areas. They've really just told the task force members, yeah, and there were a bunch of other comments like that. Well, between August and February, there were 7,272. So that's a pretty large group of public comments, again, that are against the roads and are asking for no build, asking that we prioritize our water, our wildlife, our agriculture, our rural communities, and our taxpayer dollars. So I brought that to attention to DOT, as well as some of the other steering committee members. We actually sent that data out to all of the task force members earlier in the week, so they had that information and they could be better informed during the discussion. So there are only 2 task force or rounds of task force meetings left. The task force members are required to submit a final report focused on guiding principles to DOT, to the governor, and to the legislature by November 15th. Again, we think that that deadline is too fast. And there's been concern not only with members of the public, but with many of the task force members that it's a very heavy lift and it's irresponsible to do that in that rush timeframe. So over the next 2 meetings, the task force members will continue to work on those guiding principles. We will continue to advocate for the no build option on all of those cases. At the next round of meetings, which will be the final week of August, so we'll be having meetings on August 28th, 29th, and 30th, DOT is actually going to be presenting some draft paths, as they have called them. So that will be our first look at where these roads or upgrades to existing roads could be found. So we think that's very important that we are prepared, making sure that the task force members have all of the data and information that they need about wildlife corridors, about critical linkage areas, about wetlands and aquifer recharge areas. We know that there's no path that they will be able to construct that would fully protect all of those critical natural resources and the important agricultural lands that we would lose if these toll roads were created, and some of the supplemental infrastructure. Of course, sprawling development that would come as a result of this would further tip the scales away from the quality of life that we've had and protection of some of our most treasured wildlife and natural places. So we do want to be vigilant, making sure that that the task force members are keeping DOT honest about these things, and we will be really interested to see what these paths look like. Again, the most responsible option is no build. I want to look back if there's other items that I needed to share with you. I'll just note that there is a bit of a change in sentiment of DOT, which tells me that your input, the work that we're doing with Florida Conservation Voters and the No Roads to Ruin Steering Committee and the entire coalition, that our work is making a difference. DOT repeatedly says no build is always an option. No build is always an option. That's the messaging that we have developed as organizations and businesses that are concerned about the future of our state, is no build. And the sham, the process. We hear that repeatedly from public comments and from task force members themselves. So it does make me smile when I hear those terms being used, because I know that our vigilance and our commitment to this cause is making a difference. DOT alluded to the fact that they will respect local comprehensive plans. As you may remember, part of the legislation will essentially require local communities, counties, and cities to look at their comprehensive plans, essentially how they want to grow and the mix of residential and urban and agriculture and undeveloped, how they want their communities to look. And their comp plans need to be consistent with whatever MCORS is, which is completely the backwards way to be looking at this. We should be respecting the needs of the local communities and the voice of local residents first, rather than trying to shoehorn the MCORS into there and making the local residents do whatever the legislature wants. So there's been several instances in recent years of places where Tallahassee is trying to tell the locals what is good for them, when really the locals know what is appropriate for them. And so hearing DOT say that they will respect local comprehensive plans is something that makes me feel a little bit better. That means that if you live in a community where you've been thinking about the idea of a no build resolution, similar to the one that Levy County did, this is the time to do it. This is the time to talk with your county commissioners or your city council members, talk to them about bringing that idea before their elected bodies and pushing for a no build resolution. The more of those that we have, the more difficult it would be to build this massive infrastructure and to have the devastation that will come along with it. We want to make sure that there is a continued push on protecting our conservation lands. That's why funding for programs like Florida Forever and the Rural and Family Lands Protection Program, that needs to be in place first. The more of those lands that we can get into public ownership that will allow you and I to go out and to enjoy those beautiful places, as well as benefit from the water storage and treatment, the creation of clean air from the plant species, and the support of our wildlife habitats. That is the top thing that we should be looking at to protect the ecological integrity, the water quality, and the quality of life of all Floridians and the visitors that come here and will hopefully safely be able to return back to our state. I wanted to share a piece of good news that on Wednesday, our Congress, so the U.S. House of Representatives, passed something called the Great American Outdoors Act. The Senate passed it back in June, and then it came to the House of Representatives. It passed on Wednesday, and what the Great American Outdoors Act does, it will permanently fund something called the Land and Water Conservation Fund at an amount of $900 million per year. And it will also pay for about $9.5 billion of National Park Service infrastructure backlog. So I know all of us in our homes probably have a huge to-do list, but imagine if your roof was leaking and you needed a new toilet and there was a hole in your back deck. Well, that's what's happening in some of our national parks, which impedes the enjoyment and the safety of some of our visitors. But with the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act, we can make good on some of those needed infrastructure upgrades, as well as having that dedicated funding to protect water and land throughout our nation. We've had many examples of where the Land and Water Conservation Fund has helped to protect places throughout our state. Thinking of Lake Kissimmee, a beautiful urban park over in the Kissimmee area, is one of my favorite examples. So if you think of Florida Forever, what it does on a state level, the Great American Outdoors Act will do that on a federal level. So that will go to the president's desk for his signature. He has indicated that he will sign that. So we look forward to being able to bring some money back to Florida to protect more of the places that we love here. So I'm going to start to wrap it up right now, friends. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to share an update with you. We would love for you to stay engaged with this. We have a petition that you can sign asking DOT to put the brakes on the task force process, as well as asking our 2021 legislature to revisit this whole boondoggle of a project next year and take into account the current economic needs and the budget deficits that we'll be experiencing because of the pandemic. Really evaluate whether this is the right thing for our state. We know that the right thing is no build. We will continue to share your voice, conservation voters. Please stay active. We are nearing the finish line for this stage of it. And hopefully with this November 15th deadline, the task force members will send a strong no build recommendation to our elected leaders, and we can get back to the job of protecting our people, protecting our water, our wildlife, and all of the things that we love about living in this great state of Florida. So if my mom is listening, Suzette, I want to tell you hello, and I'm going to pack up and go hit the river and go paddle for the rest of the afternoon. So I hope you are staying safe in your communities. Let's keep each other's health and safety in mind and keep fighting for the rights of all Floridians and the beautiful environment that we have here in Florida. So happy Friday. I'll speak with you all soon.